All right, I'm on the clock. Ashe.
Ashe.
I'm honored to be here for any number of reasons. I want to thank my ancestors first and foremost. I would not be here if it were not for them. I would not be here existentially, but also politically. Also, I wouldn't be in this room because I used to teach at Temple. Taught at Temple for 4 years. I taught community-centered entrepreneurship. And on my way out, I helped unionize 1,500 adjunct professors. Yes, I'll leave the rest of that story for another time. It was around the same time I took office in 2016. I was elected the same night as what's his name? Whose name shall not be spoken. And on the 400th anniversary of Jamestown, I announced that I would be introducing a bill for state-based reparations for Pennsylvania. Woo. I say state-based because unlike the very important work that happens on the federal level, with the leadership of the late Representative Conyers, I was inspired by many stakeholders to introduce a bill that focuses on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and its complicity over centuries and generations for the abject behavior, policies, programs that explicitly and directly impacted Pennsylvanians of African descent. And there's a story we tell about this great Commonwealth, about this being a colony formed for those people fleeing religious persecution, and that this is a Quaker state, and the Quakers were against slavery. Well, that's not exactly the case. But more importantly, people like to say that there was abolition in the state early on in 1780. But the reality is, that's when abolition started. It's not when slavery was abolished. That's when it began. Our ancestors were enslaved for nearly 70 years after 1780, after the gradual abolition of slavery. But it didn't just end there, because my bill is not about slavery exclusively. It is around systemic racism. Oh, yes. Systemic racism, which existed long after the actual abolition of slavery. It is deeply rooted. It is the original sin of this country. It is the source of the financial wealth that allows people to say that this is a great nation, because of the financial wealth born off the backs of our ancestors. And a lot of people associate slavery with the Deep South. Well, you see, I'm a genealogy and family historian. I descend from 4 grandparents who I knew, one of whom went to Temple before World War II and was an A student. So a black woman here, started when she was 16 and left because of the abject racism she experienced here at Temple. But all 4 of my grandparents knew their grandparents. And all 16 of my great-great-grandparents were born into a society where slavery was the law of the land in most of the states. So most of my ancestors were born property. Many of them were property of their own fathers, who were not really fathers. So you see, this is deeply personal to me, not just individually, but as someone who is a citizen, someone who is a resident of Pennsylvania, someone who is raising children here, someone who is a public servant, and who works in the state legislature. And get this part, because this is really important, particularly for the young folks here or students. Slavery was a state law.
Yes, it was.
And there was slavery in New York. New York City was one of the biggest slave ports in the New World. I have ancestors who were enslaved in New York. I have ancestors who were enslaved in Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Maryland. You notice I say they were enslaved because none of my ancestors were slaves. My ancestors were people. So we have to honor their humanity even after they've passed. And in putting this legislation forth, I am saying we need to be on record to say that Pennsylvania is complicit for the racial disparities that still exist today. We are merely talking about the symptoms, but we're not talking about the root. And I want to thank cobra, the Philadelphia chapter in particular. I want to thank my ancestors. I want to thank the bold legislators who in prior generations put up similar legislation, and all those people who believe in justice. Because this is how we're going to get it done. And so I'm honored that I get to say this and to share this moment with you on Reparations Awareness Day, and it means a lot to me, and I want to thank the leadership of cobra and all the folks who are here today.
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate your warm welcoming and remarks. Next presentation will be someone that's talking about this on a national basis. We're talking about the legislative update. Pan-African sister, Kanice Henry, co-chair of the Legislative Commission on Reparations.
Free the land, free the land.
Hello, everybody. So I have the easy job, and they gave me 15 minutes, so like any good artist, I'm gonna paint the entire canvas, okay? My job is to talk about the updates on HR 40 and SDOT 1083. The Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans. Can I just hit some button and keep going? I'm technologically inept here. So, yes, hit the next slide. So from cobra's perspective, what we're hoping to be able to do is to have a national campaign where we touch all 535 of the federal legislators. We have 435 on the House side, 100 on the Senate side. Our goal is, and by the end of this week, we will have mailed out letters to 87 senators because there are 80 something or other, 84 letters to senators. We have about 16 senators who come on board as co-sponsors for SDOT 1083. And we have, as of today, 125 co-sponsors for HR 40. You should really applaud that. This is the first time ever that there has been that many co-sponsors. And my suspicion is, as others have said, it has to do with the fact that there were so many people running for office and they recognize that they can't win without us. Right. So what would be the carrot that you dangle in the air? Yeah. Oh yes, I'm for reparations. Every single one of them has said it. Back to SDOT 1083, the Senate bill, surprisingly, our great Senator Bernie Sanders has come on as a co-sponsor. Yes, he has. HR 40, where are we? Senate Bill 1083, introduced by Senator Cory Booker, who, for all intents and purposes, isn't really a proponent of reparations, but because he was running for president, raced off to drop that legislation. He introduced it in April of 2019. In June of 2019, during Juneteenth, we had House Judiciary Committee hearings, and for those of you who may have been there, you can attest to this, the place was packed. There were people pushing to try and get in there, and there was no space for them. Before those hearings, there were 55 co-sponsors, and given the hype behind it, within a couple of days after that, it jumped to 55 co-sponsors. So we had about 25, 30 co-sponsors within a couple of days. By the year end, we had 122 co-sponsors for HR 40. SDOT 1083, the Senate bill, is still stagnant. And as I said, within the past couple of days, it has jumped again. We have 125 co-sponsors. Now, we have a problem. We would like to be able to force the congressional elected officials on Capitol Hill to take H.R. 40 to the floor for debate. However, we're not sure with 125 co-sponsors, when it goes for a vote, a yay-nay vote, that they will all say yay. So we need 25 additional co-sponsors to sign up for H.R. 40 so we can push for that debate. It's pretty much the same as the debate that we saw with the impeachment hearings. We desperately need everybody in this room to take the message far and wide. Companion Bill S.1083, as I said, is stagnant. We had 16 co-sponsors in July, we still have 16. To get it to the floor for debate, we need 37 additional co-sponsors. So you should all be saying, well, that's kind of lofty. Pie in the sky, dream on, my sister. You're right, because we don't have a majority. The Democratic Party is not the majority in the Senate. So that means we have to have bipartisan support. We've got to have bipartisan support. It is important to note, and this is something historical, you guys need to put this in your hip pocket, and when you're talking about reparations, you need to pull it out. This is important because with 37 additional co-sponsors, this country would have its first bicameral debate on redress for African Americans since the Reconstruction. Let me say this again, because I don't want you to miss it. And if you're in your history class and they're talking about something, this might get your A on your test. It is important to note, if we get 37 additional co-sponsors on S.1083, that is the companion bill to H.R. 40, this country could potentially be in a position to have its first bicameral debate on redress for African Americans since Reconstruction. That's a long time since Reconstruction. This debate is a must. It will provide this country with an opportunity to formally discuss the systemic and the institutionalized racism that continues to prevail today. What can you do? Carry the message far and wide. First of all, reparations, as the sign says, reparations is more than a check. But I'm told I'm talking about H.R. 40 and 1083, so I'm going to stay with that. H.R. 40 is not a reparations bill. It is a bill to enact legislation to establish a commission to study the history and the legacy of the crimes against an African humanity over the past 500 years. And it is also to craft remedies that address the multifaceted harms. So, please don't ask me when your check is coming, if it's in the mail. I mean, it's not going to be in the mail. This is not a bill about writing checks. This is a bill about standing up a commission to study the violence, the heinous crimes perpetrated against us over the past 5 years. We have done some really awesome things to help you out and to help ourselves out. If you want at any time to check on the progress of the legislation, all you have to do is just go to congress.gov, type in the bill name, and you can see which elected officials in your district are co-sponsors. Rest and believe, trust and believe. Know that they're not all co-sponsors. We're still trying to get about 6 of our Congressional Black Caucus members to come on as co-sponsors. Let me say that again. We're still trying to get about 6 of our Congressional Black Caucus members to come on as co-sponsors. So we worked really, really hard, but our work is still ahead of us, and we're expanding because we're asking you to help us out. No, say that, go back. We've also developed a really, really awesome interactive tool. It's an interactive map. If you go to cobraonline.org, you can find our interactive map. The map simply allows you to be able to click on your state, go to your district, and find who your elected officials are, and you can collect their contact information. It'll make it easy for you. You don't have to figure out Google, try and figure out who your elected officials are. Go to Pennsylvania, for example. I'm not sure what district she's in, but in Pennsylvania, one of the key members on the Judiciary Committee side, where this bill resides, is not a co-sponsor, and that is Congresswoman Mary Scanlon. Yes, so if you're from Pennsylvania, you might want to get your 6 best friends, or your church family, or next time you're at Big Mama's house having a picnic in the backyard, strategize on how to reach out to her to let her know that we're not at a point where we're asking for a check. We're just trying to get the bill somewhere so we can debate the merits of the bill. Be it that you're for it or you're against it, we have to have this discussion. So again, in cobraonline.org, check out our really cool interactive map. Yes. Your takeaways. H.R. 40 is not a check writing bill. It is a study bill. Again, check out in cobraonline.org to access our interactive map. It's a lot of work. We have the House side up. Right now we're working on the Senate side, but for sure we still need 25 people on the House side to help boost H.R. 40 co-sponsorship. Again, use the map, identify your elected officials who are not co-sponsors. If they are co-sponsors, they do not appear on the map. Again, making it easy for you. Anybody you find on the map is somebody who is not a co-sponsor. Within a few days of posting our map to Facebook, our co-sponsorship went from 122. It had been stagnant since December 5th, so we're up to 125 co-sponsors. This is important. Don't forget, this will be the first chance for this country to have had a bicameral discussion on redress for African Americans since Reconstruction. Again, that's a long time. Debates on the history and the legacy of the terrorism and the violence against Africans and their descendants absolutely must take place. We have to have this discussion. We can no longer afford to talk about how polarized this country is and how this person or that person is exacerbating that. We have to have the discussion, be it that it goes to the left or to the right. We have to have the discussion. Now, in summary, this is paraphrasing the Honorable Malcolm X, but he puts reparations like this. Think about it like this. You inherit your ancestors' wealth. It's wealth that passes from generation to generation. Well, it's your turn to inherit the wealth. When you inherit that wealth, you inherit the debt. And any of you who have ever had to go to probate court, or you have somebody in your family who does estate law, you know you have to pay off the bills before you can get whatever is left in grandpa's will. Your ancestors worked our ancestors for centuries, sun up to sunset, until they died. They didn't receive a dime, not a penny, not a nickel, and I've heard some really sad stories when they were emancipated and left the plantation. They couldn't even take a gunny sack with some biscuits and a chicken in it. Everything belonged to the massa. Massa sold us from plantation to plantation, just like we were cows, hogs, pigs, dogs, whatever the case may be. I just recently read a book where an ancestor was sold so that a fine ball gown dress could be bought. And we already know they sold our ancestors and paid gambling debts and all the other things. All that money has passed from generation to generation. And what has happened has been that the wealth gap has continued to grow. For us, depending upon whose information you look at, it looks like the wealth gap is about 224 years whites to blacks. So the only way we can close that gap, we gotta push for reparations. Thank you very much.
Okay, I want to now invite one of the hardest working Pan-African and Cobra members. She happens to be the secretary of the Philadelphia branch of Cobra, but she's also a global African. She's traveled to Africa with us a number of times. And I must say that she's been the most reliable person for this organization in terms of making sure that everything is done right. Give a warm welcome to Ms. Mungai.
Yes,
It is my honor to give the introduction to our guest, the Honorable Alderwoman Sister Robin Rue Simmons. Robin's commitment to achievement started 22 years ago when she launched her first business as a real estate broker. At 21 years old, she was troubled by the wealth disparities and concentrated poverty in urban communities and wanted to help young adults build wealth early through home ownership. Her first client was a college friend whom she helped purchase the home his mother had rented his entire life. Over the course of her entrepreneurial career, she launched and operated multiple businesses that employed the neighborhood workforce. This included a bookstore that offered free after-school programming and a construction firm that employed dozens of minority-skilled tradespeople while developing dozens of affordable homes funded by the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, a federal grant. Robin's passion for financial inclusion and equity in procurement fueled her advocacy at a local and federal level. Her efforts are measured by favorable outcomes, which include improved policy and increased revenue for minority and women businesses. Robin's commitment was recognized by various organizations, and her awards, acknowledgments include Women of the Year, induction into the Civil Rights Hall of Fame, and a mayoral appointment to the Minority Women Local Business Enterprise Committee for the City of Evanston. The more Robin accomplished, the more work was revealed. She decided to increase her service to her community and run for public office. Robin ran in a competitive race for 5th Ward Alderman in Evanston, Illinois, and won. She has led fearlessly and tirelessly since her first day in office and has prioritized improving the lived experience and expanding opportunities for Black residents, among other goals. There are many policy improvements and programming initiatives that were led by Alderman Simmons. But the most promising and radical is the passing of the nation's first reparations for Black residents. The recreation cannabis sales tax revenue will fund this local reparation commitment. The first $10 million of the tax will be restricted for reparations. Robin is the chairman of the Reparations Committee and a strong advocate for social equity applicants in the cannabis business. Alderman Rue Simmons is known for her solutions-only approach in service and business. In addition to her public service, Robin is the Director of Innovation and Outreach at Sunshine Enterprises and has supported over 700 neighborhood and entrepreneurs, 98% African American, 74% women, in launching or growing a business. She is also managing residential and commercial property that she owns and is Chief Strategist at Ujima Solutions Group, LLC. In her free time, she enjoys her family, new experiences, and forest bathing. Okay, it is now my honor to present to you the Honorable Alderwoman, Sister Robin Ruth Simmons. Thank you.
So, thank you for that lengthy